Assalamu alaikum. Um, on the issue of corrupt leaders, I think you touched on some really good points about this question of whether or not the removal of leaders is called for or justifiable. I think it's an issue that most people are really confused about. Um, I study a little bit. I go to an Islamic college, but as far as legally from a Sharia point, I don't think that it's permissible to remove the leaders. Um, but I think it's kind of besides the point. I think the real issue is awareness. I mean, if we wanted to get into the idea of whether or not the the administrations or the governments are, Islamic or if they're hypocritical or whatnot. I mean, you could read a lot of the past political Islamic scholars, and some of Sayyid Qutb's ideas were, a little bit extreme, and but they made good points. But I think at the base of it, it all revolves around economics. What really opened my eyes up about all of this was my Islamic economics course, because it's profound. This is the area where Muslims are totally unaware of the the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a statesman. His hadiths were not just hadiths dealing with the people of Medina and the Ansar and the Sahaba. That they were policy issues, because he was a head of state. So like you said, I mean, you mentioned Saddam. If Saddam were to die, I mean, I think that's kind of a relevant issue. Well, obviously because he's dead now, but I mean, it would have just been, military leaders or his sons taking over. Same tyranny. But I think the real issue, like I said, is economics. I think if you were to ask the people, whether or not they think it's justifiable or if it's needed to remove their corrupt leader, I think, or the monarchies, I think you're gonna get mixed reviews, and you're never gonna find a consensus. I think what's needed is awareness and education of Islam, and alhamdulillah, we see a rise of Islamic scholars again because of colonialism putting its boot on the neck of Muslims. It's creating the drive for Muslims to find their iman, alhamdulillah. But all praise be to Allah. We already know Islam. Allah will bring victory to the Muslims, inshallah ta'ala, eventually. But basically, with the monarchies, they've sold out to the West, and these so-called Islamic banks and um, these Islamic economies are not. They're not. They just replace riba with other words, and it's still riba. They just replace institutions that are interest bearing and interest bearing economies. It's all conflated, and it's obfuscation. It's confusing the issues and covering it all up, and basically using the West as a template of how to run a capitalist Western economy and society in their society, with the cover pretext of Islam as the label, slap the Islamic label on it. So, I mean, I think that's it. I mean, whether it be these corrupt, sort of secular, semi-secular, labeled Islamic governments, I think it's the economic issues, because it's like with the Saudi government, it's all economics, man. They have no way of tapping into the idea of, because that's like the one area where even if they have appointed muftis that they can't really speak on, that they're not allowed to be too critical of. They can be critical of the rulers in some of the countries and whatnot, but you cannot talk about the economic issues. If you do, khalas. So I mean, that's my contribution. I think economics is the key to it all, because if we follow the kuffar to these in their policies and in their ways of running their governments, because the governments are built on the economies. Without the economies, it's all irrelevant. So until we can provide the society and the people, the masses, with a viable solution, they're not going to support another solution. And like you said, you didn't really have a solution, and that's the problem. Without the economics ideas and solutions, we can't come up with governmental solutions and ideas and alternatives, because we have no base for it. So I think that's where we need to start. But inshallah ta'ala, this is an area that young Muslims are, researching. The Islamic University in Malaysia has a big Islamic economics department, and they do a lot of work. You should look up their website and whatnot. Check them out. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.